Let's look at this. Is faith a gift of God? Looking at Ephesians chapter 2, verse 8. So this is a debated passage and we'll talk about why in just a moment. Let's jump over to the computer and I'll show you what the problem is. You can see here in Ephesians chapter 2, verse 8. This is the New American Standard Version and you can see what it says here. For by grace you have been saved through faith, and that not of yourself, it is the gift of God. And the problem here is that what I've just read to you is the New American Standard, and that not of yourself, or the King James is much the same, and that not of yourself. And that's actually probably a better translation, but some translations like the Revised Standard Version, the New Revised Standard Version, and the ESV use and this is not your own doing. Or the New International Version and the NET both use and this is not from yourself. And by changing from that to this, there's a difference between those two pronouns. The word that in English, and there's an equivalent in Greek as well, has the idea of something far away. That is over there somewhere. This is right here, right? And so that's the distinction between them. So by using that, like the King James and the New American Standard does, it has the idea that that is something back in the past there that we've just been talking about, but it's not very specific because it's got that distance idea. This is not your own doing then, makes you think, if you're an English reader, that it's the most recent thing said that is the gift of God. And the problem here, if we go back here, in English here, looking at the New American Standard, it's that, not of yourself. The ESV is this. What does this refer to? Well, it's probably faith, right? At least that's what you're likely to think if you're an English reader. But the Greek isn't quite that simple. You can see here the Greek text here, and this not from yourself, right? So this is the equivalent passage right here. And tauto here is actually a near demonstrative, which is to say that it is referring to this English equivalent of the word this. The problem with that is that the word this in like the demonstrative here can be used in a number of different ways. And this is really the question here, because whenever we look at a pronoun in Greek and we're trying to figure out what is that pronoun referring to, we're looking for a noun that it matches in case, gender, and number. And if we look here, you can see this is in the neuter. You can see down the bottom here, I've got my parsing down the bottom, pronoun, demonstrative, nominative, singular, neuter, this. Okay, so you can see the parsing for this. It's a nominative, singular, neuter. So what we're looking for then, when we're looking in this text, is to say, well, where is another nominative, singular, neuter in this passage that we can match it to? And we can go back up here and we can look at kariti, right? Is that a nominative, singular? Of course it's not. The reason we know that is, first of all, because we know our parsing, right? But secondly, because the article here is a feminine dative singular article. So it's clearly not kariti. And then pisteos is also in the feminine. So neither of these are the word that it's referring back to. Tauto is neuter, pisteos and karite are both feminine. So tauto is not referring to either of these two ideas here. So it's not saying that either grace or faith are actually the thing that is not from yourself, but is the gift of God. So the question then becomes, well, what is it? What is tauto here referring to? And the answer is that tauto and demonstrative pronouns generally can be used in the neuter to refer to a concept as a whole. Let me give you an example of this. If we pop up here and we go to 1 Corinthians 11 verse 24, where we are, in fact, let's go back a verse to 23, we can see here, and after giving thanks, he broke, and this is Jesus with regards to the bread, and the bread here is an accusative singular masculine, right? And having given thanks, he broke and he said, "This is my body on behalf of you." Now here, this is easy enough to explain. Here's the same demonstrative pronoun, and in this case, tauto here is in the neuter, but that's because it's followed by estin and then another neuter. So in other words, this is a predicate nominative, right? And the tauto is the subject, and the tosoma is your object, right? This is this is my body. So the body, this thing that I'm referring to here on behalf of you. But this tauto here, this do on behalf of, in remembrance of me. So do this. Now this here is not referring to tosoma. Even though tosoma is in the neuter, this tauto here is not referring back to that, because you don't do the body, right? It doesn't make any sense to say, do the body in remembrance of me. It's not saying that, it's saying, eat this. So this is referring here to a concept that sits in behind the breaking of bread and the giving of thanks, right? And so that we can then eat. We do this, we take communion, we take the bread as a concept. This you do in remembrance of me. And so here we see tauto, this demonstrative pronoun that is in this case being used to refer back to some other concept that is there in the text, even though it's not, there's no explicit antecedent for that particular pronoun. So when we go back then to Ephesians chapter 2 verse 8, that makes sense for this passage as well. And this, not from you. So what is this referring to? Well, I think the best thing to do is to refer to all of this that's come before as this whole thing. By grace you are saved through faith. All of that is not from yourself, but it is a gift of God. That's how I would take this. So then, does that mean that faith is not a gift of God? Well, I think this passage suggests that faith is a gift of God, but this passage is insufficient to argue that faith is a gift of God on its own. However, now before I go on, if you're finding this helpful, please do me a favor, hit the like button, and if you haven't already done so, subscribe to this channel and hit the notify bell, and that way when new videos like this come up, and there are a few coming, you'll be the first to find out about it. Let's get back to it. However, one of the principles of interpretation is that we don't hang our theology on just a single verse for these ideas. And I would argue that behind the idea of faith and the necessity of faith being a gift of God lies a significant amount of anthropology and hamartiology. And if you don't know what that means, it basically means doctrine of man and doctrine of sin. And specifically, we need to understand how the doctrine of sin, or rather more specifically, how sin affects mankind. And I think when we get to the point where we understand that, we see that man is dead in sins, as it says in Ephesians 2 verse 1 through 3, right? And therefore needs faith to be given, because sin kills you and faith is the only way by which we can respond to God. Now, don't get hung up on the arguments around that. That's not the point of this video. But what I do want to show now is that there are other passages that tell us, I think quite clearly, that faith is a gift or a work of God. Let me show you two to start with. And the first one we're going to look at is here in Romans chapter 3. For I say, on account of the grace that is given to me, or through the grace given to me, to all those who are among you, not to think more or think above that which it is necessary to think, but to think in order to be sensible. In other words, to think with sound knowledge, to think with sound thinking, essentially. Why? To each, as God has divided a measure of faith. Now, this word here, emerisen here, this is a word that has the idea of separating into parts or dividing, but there is a way of thinking about this, and you can see here, to make an allotment. This is distribution. So here, God is the one who distributes or apportions or deals out or assigns a measure of faith to each. In other words, what this is saying is that the faith that you or I have is consequent to the faith that God has allotted to us. We don't all have the same measure of faith, but if we have any measure of faith, then this passage suggests, again, well, strongly, I reckon, better than a suggestion here. This passage tells us really that that is a work that God has gifted or has parted that faith to us, and so that's why we have that measure of faith at all. But there's another verse which I think helps us with this a little bit more, and that is in John chapter 6 verse 29. Jesus answered and he said to them, this is the work of God. And here we have tauto again, in the neuter again, but again, notice this is a predicate nominative. The work, this is the work. Okay, so these are equated, of God. And then we have hina, followed by pisteuete, in order that you believe in whom that one has sent, whom God has sent, right? That's what it's saying here. So normally hina is a purpose clause, but in this case, because we are using tato in this way, this is actually what we call a cataphoric use of the demonstrative pronoun. An anaphoric use of the pronoun looks up for an antecedent in the what's come prior, which is what we had with Ephesians 2:8. We had an antecedent in the prior, which was that conceptual idea. Here there's no antecedent because all we have here is, Jesus answered and said to them. So here the tato is pointing ahead. What is it that is the gift, the work of God? Well, in this case, that you believe in him whom he has sent. In other words, here the work of God is trusting in Christ. You cannot trust in Christ unless God does that work in you first. So even though I think Ephesians 2:8 is difficult to argue for faith itself being a gift of God, though I would say it's a strong suggestion that yes, faith probably is a gift of God, I wouldn't lean on that verse to argue that faith is indeed the gift of God. I would go to passages like Romans 12:3 and also John 6:29 to see there that very clearly Jesus says that believing in the one whom God has sent is a work of God. So I hope that's been helpful. Let me know in the comment section below where you're at in this argument. And, let's talk about Greek. Let's not talk too much about theology. And I know even just saying that, some people will watch the first half of this video, get angry, and then just go into the comments, and that's fine. But if you're watching this far, don't be that person. Be one of those people who are gracious, kind, and recognizing that we're all in different places, still learning together, and we need each other's help to grow. So that's the hope I have for you. And so leave a comment below. Now, if you are interested in being able to dig into the Greek like that, there's a couple of things that we have so we can help you with this. First of all, we have our growth membership where we dig into meaty topics like this on a regular basis every month. And we go quite deep in these topics, and it'd be interesting. It would be great to have you join us for that. And as part of the growth membership, you get to join me for our office hours call on Greek every week. And you can ask pretty much any question you want about the Greek text anywhere in the New Testament, and we'll just talk about that as well. So if you're interested in that, and also in our Greek Mastery membership and Hebrew Mastery membership, then download our starter pack at bma.to/starterpack and get underway today, at least by finding out what is involved. And we look forward to serving you inside the membership if that's where the Lord leads you. Otherwise, we look forward to providing you with another video on this subject next week. Until then, keep taking small, consistent steps toward mastery. We'll see you then.